think it's just about explaining where you're going to put the mic, explaining that you might not get it right first time. Cables, battery systems, RF cable, fibre cable, sound blankets.
I'm with Richard Meredith at the audio department in West London, and we're here to talk about really what it is to run a hire facility and supervise some of the complicated jobs that we kind of take for granted on TV as just working fine and easily. And I'm talking sort of the jobs that you manage here at the audio department. Do you mind running through a few of the things that you look after?
Absolutely. So the sort of prime show that everybody knows really is the Great British Bake Off. And that format, it's sort of nominally called format competition show, which is a sort of warm, it's not a reality show, it's a sort of warm collaborative type of style of show. I look after many shows of that kind of nature, the Great British Sewing Bee, Pottery Throwdown, Good with Wood, Glow Up, you know, all that have a kind of similar way of working for us.
The real challenge in your world is that you've got so many different things all thrown out all over the place, and you have to distribute aerial systems, working with maybe 30 or more radio microphones.
Yeah, up to that, yeah.
Quick tour of the place, and then we'll get chatting about, you know, the shows that you work on.
Absolutely.
How that all goes.
So you're into the backstage area now. This is where we keep all our comm systems, Motorola's, cables, battery systems, RF cable, fibre cable, sound blankets, loudspeakers. We use this room to build up our own sort of internal show. So we've got the great British Bake Off, the professionals coming up. That's the next one, big one we're doing. And then through to the sort of dry hire department. So any sort of customers that we have that are just wanting to dry hire kit from us, they're not taking any crew, they just want some gear.
Shall we just have a quick run through of what it is that you've got for people to grab?
Predominantly, really, Wizzycom and Zaxcom are our two brands that people most want to rent, and those are the two sort of options we look for our own shows. Got a bit of electros, some audio limited down there, some A10 and some A20 receivers down there, and then we move into the Zaxcom world. So for us, quite a lot of the shows might want to utilise an onboard recording. So Zaxcom is very useful to us because it does obviously have that onboard recording functionality, wireless timecode into it, which is much easier if we're setting up a lot of transmitters. The fact that we can just, they will all just, the timecode pings in, might save us 10 minutes from having to jam each one individually, and that 10 minutes in the morning when it's very early can be crucial. We've got all the sort of portable receivers, the QRX 200s, the IFB units, the URXs, the ERXs, and then our sort of, for again our nature of shows, we tend to go with a dual, a 2 battery LA transmitter. For us, generally battery life is more important than transmitter size. So we would rather go with a transmitter that we don't have to change a battery so often because, you know, they're not always accessible. They might have disappeared. So up top here we've got our sort of rack mount receivers for Zaxcom. So in our gallery scenarios, this would be what we would be putting in our sort of D-rig galleries. Not as glamorous as a studio TV gallery, but you know, normally in a field or a shed or some other sort of location place. We build up entire systems for people who maybe have suddenly got a job that's way bigger than that they've ever had before, and you know, and they're just vastly outside the amount of kit they've got themselves. So we could build whole mixer kits up for those people, but you know, day-to-day rental is generally augmenting systems that people have got already. Coming through here, Sanken obviously, and DPA, and then we are into sort of, you know, short shotguns, mini CMITs. Basically, we have a bit of everything because we have to support anybody in any sort of use case.
And along here, sound devices. Recorders, right?
Yeah, lots of sound devices. I mean, it's obviously we've been involved with sound devices since they started. I mean, I've had, you know, multiple units of everything they've ever produced, and we've sort of grown with them in a way.
Well, I'd like to know a bit more about the kind of jobs that you do when you've got both bag units running out to do things and also like a centralised base.
Yeah, we did a show about 12 months ago, which was set in a castle in Austria, and literally every room in the castle was in use at some point, but not all at the same time. No time to re-rig areas between scenarios, because the scenarios could possibly be continuous. They might just want free reign of this big location. But we needed to have the ability to hear anybody at any point in this castle, effectively.
That's pretty scary, because knowing the thick walls in castles, you just don't get range through walls, even with the best directional aerials. So I often live on a trolley. I put myself right next to a wall and just get range into a room. So how do you go about planning and getting a setup that allows for them to film anywhere in a castle simultaneously?
Well, the two questions that I generally ask straight away is, how many contributors have you got, obviously, and then how many cameras have you got? That's question 2. And then question 3 is, how many things do you want to do at the same time? And that generally, even if they're very early in the production process, they can have a sense of what those 3 things are going to be. Because we just need to look at how we resource these simultaneous scenarios. We get plans out, we look at the site, we work out which the areas are going to be in use, and then we have to get down to the practical logistics of, okay, which way are we physically going to bring cables that are out of shot, always looking for doorways that we can go through that aren't going to impede any fire regulation, you know, little windows, cubby holes, routes through, you know. So I go crawling in roofs, buildings, look behind every door, find out where the power is, to try and work out the best route.
Do you mind showing me what that might look like, and sort of like the sort of setup that you might have in a place like
Absolutely. that? So we've got the show we're setting up for at the moment is the Bake Off Professionals. I tend to use a larger console, and we're using PIX recorders. They've been incredibly reliable, and we have no need to do anything else at the moment. 4 lots of 4, 16 radio mic receivers in a single 1U.
That's pretty good.
And again, with this unit, we could bring 4 antennas natively into this unit. But if you go beyond 4, or for most of the receiver units, it's just 2. As soon as you need to think beyond 2 antennas, you have to then work out how you're going to combine all those into a single diversity pair that's going to go into the
rack
block receiver. Our go-to distribution at the moment is for a sort of fixed facility is the MAT 288 Wisicom unit. So this can actually run 8 pairs of antennas. This has got 2 active at the moment. So number 1 is blue, so it's showing that's an active antenna, and number 2 is green, that's showing that's just got passive antennas on it. So number 2 will just be a set of antennas that are nearby. Number 1 will be a set of antennas that could be, you know, up to 100 metres away. And the beauty is, you never really want all your antennas on at once. So just talking about the job in Austria, we were running, I think, either 20 or 24 antennas on that show across the whole castle.
Wow, it's 12 pairs.
12 pairs, but we were never using all of them all at once. So, you know, it's advantageous to be able to turn off ones you don't want, because you don't want to be picking stray RF up from an unknown source. And that could be a runner innocently using a Motorola outside next to a tree that's got 2 antennas in it that aren't in use.
So let's just say somebody was doing that. Then you could just say, "Oh, I just want to turn that off."
We can just knock that off. So there we go. So that's that zone gone. You know, and that's that zone gone. So we can sort of, you know, tune the system to the scenarios as it's developing. And you know, a lot of these shows are almost like continuously rolling. Some of the fixed rig shows are literally running 24 hours a day. So you know, we have to be agile. We will sort of follow the action. If somebody's going out to a swimming pool in a house, let's get the swimming pool antennas up and running, because there's somebody going out there. So you know, we try and use as few as we can at any one time, and just focus on the zones that are in use.
When they're not even within the zone, I suppose that's when you have your field recordist team who go out and cover. They take a smaller bag rig and might go out and do. I'm imagining when people go out on the road and they go out to get things.
They go shopping, or they go, you know, they go and do an activity or something. So it tends to. We obviously run a compatible receiver system in the bag. So whatever system we're using as the transmission system, we'll have a compatible receivers in the bags, and then we'll have sets of bags ready to deploy to go off with individual cameras, off-site, do an event, you know, a challenge, whatever that might be.
Shall we head back to the other room? I wanted to ask you about a recent job that you worked on.
Yes.
Talking about aerial distribution and working over large distances.
Yeah.
I understand you were working a little bit with Stuart Wilson and Tim White when they were working on 1917.
Yeah.
So this was the single take, Sam Mendes. Do you mind talking a little bit about what went on behind the scenes when you were helping them with the prep?
Yeah, I mean, it is a good illustration that prep is key, because Stuart had a very definite idea of how he wanted to approach the shoot, and he wanted to approach it in the traditional way. He didn't want to get sucked down the road of maybe looking at body-worn recordings. Mm-hmm. He wanted to know that every line of dialogue he'd got, he could hear.
Yeah.
So he wanted to be at his cart in his normal position. Yeah. However, the talent could have been hundreds and hundreds of meters away in trenches. He wanted to have, the landscape and the terrain that he was on was quite difficult to move around. So he didn't want to be moving all the time. So he wanted the signals to come to him rather than he go to the signals. So. We talked about a distributed antenna system, which relied heavily on fibre to get him the long distances that he needed. However, it wasn't a fixed thing every day. Their locations were changing every day, so it needed to be a hybrid solution of a fixed installation, but be agile enough to move every day so that the local antennas could be optimised for each different part of the scene. So it wasn't, even though the end solution was a single shot, there was places where the takes were blended.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Obviously. So, it was shot in chunks. However, the chunks that it was shot in were enormous. Yeah. Hundreds and hundreds of meters of movement.
In and out of buildings and up and down hills and into trenches.
So the sort of standard sort of setup would have been a kind of fibre, a trunk fibre run to get from Stuart to where the action was happening. And then that we would bring into that several different antenna drops, which would be successively longer and longer. So we'd probably stop the fibre at where the action ended, or vice versa, and then have successive longer and longer and longer runs out to 100, 120 metres on coax.
I see.
So I think Stuart would probably maybe be using 4 to 6 pairs of antennas to get him that coverage he needed. Those 6 pairs were optimised on coax to a point where we could combine it through a MAT unit, like the one we saw earlier. Yeah. And then that would then be converted to fibre and brought all the way back to Stuart on a long fibre run, so that he didn't have to move. The idea of a fibre run for RF, is used a lot in outside broadcast, and Stuart was drawing on knowledge from other people to apply to his scenario to solve the problem that he had for that particular project.
We often get asked, how do we wire up people who are running around a football pitch and doing active sports?
Yeah.
And do you mind telling us a little bit about the David Beckham show you worked on just recently?
Yeah, I mean, this was quite an exciting project, actually, because not only did we have the challenges of running around, but it was kids. So it was a kids football team. So suddenly we had the challenges of running around, the challenges of kids and their filming and what you can show and all the rest of it. So we had to really sort of tread quite a careful ground in the way we did this. So we did actually get agreement to mic the kids all the time for every game, which I was thrilled about, because that was, in my mind, the only way that they were going to get the sound that they needed for the show. So we had to be able to mic them really quickly, because we only had a very, very short time when they arrived in the morning for their practice sessions to get them rigged. In fact, they didn't give us any more time than they normally have. So it was about 20 minutes of sort of them to get their kit on and basically get their boots on and get out on the pitch. So we actually made a hybrid solution out of an URSA backstrap and an URSA chest strap. Each one was sized individually to the child, and we modified them. I actually sewed them together so that we could pre-rig the mic in the chest strap, but we could pull it on over their head in one go. And then latch it down and do it really quickly, because we just didn't have time to sort of be able to fit each component individually every day. And we wanted them, you know, they were all named, they were all assigned to every child. So we had a very quick solution. Whoever happened to be working on a Sunday morning very early through the winter, that they were all named, they could find the right strap and get them on the right child quickly.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And then it sort of just, literally, so you're saying you pull it over their top.
Yeah,
was it like the chest strap section was sort of sewn to the sides of the back strap, so it was all kind of one piece.
It was sewn. The chest strap came along and sewed to the part of the back strap around the sides there. So they just stood there with the hands up, and we could come behind.
Yeah.
And pull it over their head with their hands up, and then while they were sort of finding their shirt. Or, you know, getting their shirt sorted out, we could get the transmitter in.
Yeah.
We had them quite tight because we didn't want them to slip, because obviously we didn't want to disadvantage the team because they were wearing a radio mic. Yeah. And also we just didn't want them flopping around.
Yeah.
You know, there was a lot of rustle while they were actually running, but it's worth reminding people with sports, when there's a lot of movement, that actually during something like a football match, you tended to find the moment they were going to shout at their fellow player for doing something stupid, they actually stopped. Yeah. So, you know, if you think about the way that action happens, they very rarely were speaking quietly while they were running along. Yeah. You know, and actually, it worked very well. They got heaps and heaps of very, very usable audio from the solution.
5. Oh, I thought it was gonna go through. Yeah, give me that. Yeah. Give me my pool.
There's some very big characters in the team as well. Very boisterous and loud.
Yeah. You've got done.
He knows the only way he can get better is by focus and practice.
I've seen lots of shows where they're wearing necklaces and like hiding mics in necklaces. This is often thrown on the sound department. It's a kind of costume sound collaboration. It's in camera, so it's got to look right for the show, but it's also got to sound right.
We've sort of done a number of solutions, and again, we don't assume that the solution we did last time might be appropriate for the show that comes along next time. So we've made necklaces that are in sight but not plainly obviously a microphone. Yeah. So we've done 3D prints with mics poking out of them, and rigged to some kind of tubing around the neck. Yeah. Done that for some things where maybe people are in swimwear, the beach type of things. Hunted, we put together when that show first came along. We put together a neck loop that could be popped on and off under any layers of clothing. So it was a mic which was fed down a tube of fleece. Yeah. That could be popped on and off, but because of course Hunted, they were completely self-contained. There was no sound recording, so it had to be something that they could do themselves that would pretty much work in any scenario. They were given a rule that not to bury it under more than 2 layers of clothing. Right. Try and have it exposed, but obviously then there's wind. So we designed a solution which would work well everywhere. Yeah. But could work anywhere. So, if they did bury it, it still worked. If it was exposed and windy, it was windproofed enough to kind of protect it against the majority of the sort of the wind. Because again, the last thing they want to think about when they're on those kind of projects is the mic. It needs to become just part of their uniform that they can then forget about, really.
We're on. These guys are trained to find people.
14 ordinary people on the run.
They're just closing in on us.
I don't really trust anybody at the moment. I think that's what happens.
There's somebody there. We're surrounded. I'm scared.
So the Great British Bake Off, which is a loved show in the UK. So you've done all series from day one.
From the very start.
12 series?
At least now.
Okay. And obviously the thing is with that show is it's in a tent in the middle of a field. Yeah. And tents are generally quite creaky, noisy, windy, rainy, what kind
everything, yeah. I mean, the one question people always ask me is how do you manage when it rains? And we've actually mitigated against that as much as we could, because I had fortunately quite an early involvement with the tent design. In fact, the design of the whole show in terms of audio, I was included in the very early conversation. So the one thing we got done with the tent was we had conical tops put on it. So rather than being a traditional kind of raked roof on the tent, pitched roof, I'd seen on some exhibition tents or something, I think, these cone tops.
Yeah.
So I suggested we use those because obviously when it rains on it, it hits where the water hits the cone is much further away from the source of the sand, and then it runs down it rather than, I mean, obviously some rain does still come on the lower areas, but the majority of the rain actually runs off. So that allows us to actually carry on filming the baking element without stopping. Right. We can't stop the baking, so we can actually, you carry on while it's raining. Right. And the other thing we put in place was actually the ability to allow us to keep filming while they're using their mixers, their food mixers. Mm-hmm. So we researched all the food mixers and landed on the one that had that. We did some sound test measurements and landed on the quietest one, which became the unit they use now, which allows people to have a conversation with a food mixer going in between them.
To keep stirring.
Try not to mix it too much. You ever mix it, make it like rubber. Finish it off by hand.
OK, thanks.
He said finish it off by hand, and then he winked at me.
Okay.
And as long as we control the speed a little bit, they can actually, if it's on 1 or 2, you can have a perfectly reasonable conversation while they're actually mixing their dough, or
That's one of these strange little things where sound can really get involved in prep, and it can fix an awful lot of issues later
completely
on.
And when these genres of shows are in their early days, people, one of the things we can't stop them baking. We have to be able to find a way around filming. We don't want to stop filming, but we don't want to stop baking. So how do we do both at the same time? And that was, so we looked at the solutions to make that work. Yeah.
Have you ever had any shows like on Bake Off or in any other situations where you've just needed to do something special with radio mics?
A recurring theme, I suppose, over the years has been chef's whites, because on Bake Off Professionals, they're in whites. We've done lots of cookery shows with chefs, and they always cook in their whites, whether it's the competitors or the chefs themselves. So chef's whites has always been a sort of challenge. So here's a typical chef's white, and the problem is you've got two overlapping pieces of material. And so a lot of chefs enjoy a lot of their own cooking, let's put it like that, and these things then can end up being quite tight on people. So you've got these two layers absolutely pressing hard against
really
each
high
other
against the neck.
And we have found that wherever we, even if you try and hide it near the edge, it's never that satisfactory. So we always on our shows end up coming out of a buttonhole and hiding the mic, a white mic with a white windshield on behind the button or the toggle. So but that is always a recurring theme. But again, you generally always need to be prepared with white mics. It's with black mics, it's a whole different ballgame. With a white mic, you can almost do it without telling anybody. If you've got a black mic, you might have to explain yourself. So we do have, again, we have full sets of white mics purely standing by for doing shows with chefs in chef's whites.
Do you have any advice for people who maybe haven't got that much experience with radio mics about the sort of the approach to take with actors, and when you approach them and how to make them feel comfortable with wearing one? And
I think it's just normal diplomacy. Introduce yourself, tell people your name. I always introduce myself and say I'm Richard the Sound Recordist, and it immediately puts people in their comfort zone that you're a sort of friendly person. I mean, children is always difficult because obviously you always need a chaperone. So again, I introduce myself to the chaperone as much as I do to the child. I try and treat children like adults. I don't talk down to them, and I explain to them clearly what I'm about to do, and the chaperone as well, because at the end of the day, it's the chaperone that's establishing whether it's appropriate for you to mic the child. The child might not know be able to say for themselves, you know, whether they're comfortable with it. So again, I always include the chaperone in that conversation. But I think it's just about explaining where you're going to put the mic, explaining that you might not get it right first time.
Yeah, that's true.
Get them into the mindset that this isn't just maybe a 30-second one-hit wonder. I might go away and have a listen, then we decide that actually where we've got it is not right. Yeah. So I get that mindset going straight away that, look, I might be back, I'm very sorry, but, you know, we might have to have a couple of goes at getting it in the right position. Yeah. And if you prepare them for that, when you come back to them, it's not a surprise. You know, sometimes contributors think if you're coming back for a second attempt, it's their problem.
Yeah, what have I done wrong?
Yeah,
what?
Is it not working? Or, no,
it's
working fine. It's just we just need to move it.
Is it about apologising, or is it just that going back in and saying, you know, it's not you, it's just the process?
I'm a big apologiser. I can't help. You know, I think you just have to explain to people that it's not a fixed art, and you know, and it is dependent on what they're wearing. And I gently try and encourage people, if they have arrived in something that's awkward to Mike, or you know, it might be slightly see-through, or you know, unhelpful in a sort of, you know, in a generic way towards the sound department. I always say, I really like what you're wearing, but is there any chance you could maybe wear something else tomorrow, because that would actually help us with miking up. So I never hold back on actually saying, you know, would it be possible for you to wear, you know, something else, and just almost put it back in there and say, look, it'll help, it'll just speed up the process. So they know that it's going to be quicker the next day because they've helped. You know, it's just about being collaborative again, isn't it? Being collaborative with your contributor.
That's right. It seems like your jobs have a slight sting in the tail. They have a different challenge that it goes above what we sometimes find in film and TV. And one of those things is just communications, comms, and how everyone communicates with each other. Now, in the world of TV, we have Motorola's, and they're normally looked after by a runner or the production department. But I understand it's a little bit different for your shows.
Yeah, I think you mean film. So in your film, in your sort of film scenario, generally the ADs look after the Motorola's.
Yeah.
But there's no AD department particularly in TV production. There's a floor manager often on our sort of format shows, and maybe they have an assistant, but there's nobody really looking after anything beyond that. So because the comm systems sort of make noise, you know, people just naturally assume it's the sound department's responsibility. So we have sort of embraced comms as part of our provision, because inevitably it was kind of happening anyway, because it was assumed. You know, that wasn't too bad when it was just Motorola's, but obviously the comm systems sort of relatively recently got quite a lot more complicated. Yeah. So actually, one of the things we talk about in the hire department, as much as audio, is setting up the comm systems. Because that in itself, actually, even if you only set up a comm system, it's all still audio. Yeah. You're just passing speech messages. Yeah. So the principles are the same, and actually you have to deal with comms feeds in the same way that you have to deal with audio feeds. Ideally, they need compressing and EQing in a perfect world, if you're sort of dealing with analog comms. But, you know, more recently now we're into this IP comm system, the Bolero system, and that type of thing. So actually all the guys here learn about that as well, because it's another string to their bow. I mean, we've got a couple of packs here. I mean, you know, these systems, they're a 6-channel system. And, you know, it could be deemed overkill in a lot of scenarios, but actually we had a situation recently where we had a DOP who wanted to hear the director, but at the same time wanted to be able to talk privately to the rest of his camera team, and then privately again to his gaffer and lighting team on 3 separate channels, but be able to be across those conversations at the same time. So for some jobs, they're completely and utterly appropriate. Some people would actively rather have this over a Motorola or something simple. But generally, we're finding we're doing a kind of bridging thing where the majority of the runners and the production department just want a Motorola. But the core primary people, the people close to set who need to have these more complex conversations, are actively leaning towards this sort of system now. So we've bought into this system, and and are providing it as part of our package.
So this is almost a new position to organise how this works, right? I mean, is this creating a?
It is.
I
I think this is almost, it's created another role, because I think almost people now have used it maybe in a TV studio environment to start with, and then transition to doing something on location. It's sort of like, well, where's the box that I normally have, you know? But with that, they are complicated to set up. So it has almost created another role out on location for effectively a comms manager or a comms engineer or comms programmer. Even if they don't have that person for the whole shoot, quite often we find they might want somebody for 2 or 3 days to set the system up, let it settle down, and then leave it basically once it's configured.
Because presumably this works best. You're working in a site where maybe like you've got a big stage and maybe you've got some rooms off the stage, and you need to put reception points in these areas. Cable them back to the main.
I mean, this is the thing, what people want is always what they want, the magic solution. They want it to work with the range of a Motorola that they've used for the last 25 years, but have 6 channels and go anywhere and do anything. So obviously there is limitations, because it does work on a high frequency. It doesn't have the range of a Motorola, so you have to treat it more like a radio mic system, whereby if you want coverage in several areas, you have to put antenna systems in several areas. So this is where it comes back to our fibre systems. We can share fibre systems to do maybe comms and radio mics. We are looking more at providing infrastructure as part of the overall solution. So it's important that the team learn about the comms. It just helps with the audio knowledge as well. It's all just something else to learn.
So from a training point of view, there must be a lot of people that have come through the audio department and then gone into the industry and like become freelancers.
Yes.
So is this a good way to get through and into the film industry?
I mean, absolutely. Almost the hire department was set up to give us a platform to train people. In the early days, I really realised that there wasn't much training happening, and I was trying to work out how I could bring assistants into the industry. And actually, I thought, well, if we put them in a hire department, they can learn the equipment in a safe environment. We've got a service that we're offering to people as well, where we hire equipment, and it all sort of collaborates together. So absolutely, the likes of Theo, who's with us now, and the other guys that have been through the system and are now out in the industry working as sound recordists, they've all come through here, learnt the equipment. So when they actually go out on set, initially as an assistant, and then as finally as a recordist on some of our shows, they've already got the equipment knowledge, and they can just add to that then the set etiquette and the understanding of controlling the environment and all the other things that we have to deal with when we're on location.
So it's a benefit to you because you can use these skills that you've taught so many people, bring them onto your own productions, and then you can crew up from the people who may have come through the audio department and now become freelancers as well.
Absolutely, and my pool of freelancers are generally the big happy family that have been through this entire operation. And we've got obviously a pool beyond that, but the people that know the way my jobs work are the people that have been through the system, and I can they're my most trusted soldiers, as somebody put it, in terms of managing the jobs on their own. I can't be everywhere at once. I can't manage multiple projects at the same time, so I have to have trusted people who know the way that we work, and and have the knowledge of all the equipment, not just the audio but comms as well.
And so I think it'd be nice to meet Theo, who's been working at the audio department for a couple of years now, right? Theo, do you mind just jumping in? So you're currently building a kit. Do you mind running through what it is that you're setting up?
Yeah. So this is a mixer kit that I'm preparing. This is day to day really. A lot of the time we're dealing with recordists that do have a lot of their own kits. So sometimes it is literally just the case of a transmitter or two, a bit of time code, some IEMs. But this particular individual needs a full mixer kit.
And I noticed you got some phonak systems here as well. Is this job needing earpieces?
Yeah, so this particular person has requested phonak. It's an absolute staple of what we send out week in, week out. We have the older Invisity, the VHF system, but the Rogers just seem to be really popular at the moment.
Do you see yourself going onto set and working in that sort of field later on? Is that where you're heading?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course.
Yeah.
That's why I come here is to be the dream to be a recordist, and I think the luxury is that everyone that's done this, I'm literally surrounded by sound recordists like every day. So if there's something you don't know, you can go to any number of people here, and they'll be able to answer a query, or it's very open in terms of everyone's been in a situation and they can answer a question.
Yeah,
so
that's really cool. All right, great, thanks a lot.
Cool.
If anyone's watching this who wants to get into sound, what are the sort of things that you look for when you're crewing up?
Common sense, really, I suppose, is number one. But, you know, at the end of the day, just being a decent kind of human being, you know, and just being polite and respectful of people and, you know, just having a nice demeanour, I guess. It's you know, they're difficult places, film sets, and you have to be able to read people. You have to be able to read situations, know when it's appropriate to, you know, go up to people. So I think it's, you know, somebody who's perceptive of other humans, you know, and has got some common sense are the traits. You know, technical skills can be taught, but actually human skills are quite hard to instill in people. The one thing I do ask of people that come and work through the hire department or come and work with me is that they are entirely intent on working in the sound department, because it's hard enough to find, you know, good people anyway. But it's really disappointing if you find that you get a really good person, but actually they're just using it as maybe a way to transition into another department. Yeah. So, you know, I always look for some, you know, history of sound-related things, whether that's playing musical instruments, being in the school choir. You know, I always find out what people have done at school and see what interests they've had outside school. And I'm always pretty insistent that there's some sound-related element to that, because that gives you a good idea. You know, I don't think people suddenly find sound late in to deciding where their career is going to go. I think there's an inherent love for sound inside people, and I think that, you know, the best sound people are people that, you know, absolutely love it beyond it just being a job. Yeah. So I always look for, you know, musical instrument playing or you know, having their own home studio, DJing even, although sometimes, you know, those disciplines can be different, but some of it is transferable, sometimes not. But, you know, just somebody who's gravitated towards sound in a younger, in their younger self, because I really think that means that they're going to stick with it.
That's really interesting, and I think that's really is true. I know in my own experience, it's the joy of music and joy of recording music, and that experience with music is quite out of body sometimes. It can be such a joy to be responsible for the recording of a music. In the same way, the same enjoyment you get for recording music is the same enjoyment you get for recording the sound of a voice or voices. Or
it might be anything. You know, we had somebody who came and said they just loved the outdoors and loved listening to the outdoors. So they didn't go out for walks in the wood to look at the trees. They went out just to listen to the birds and the the insects and everything else. And actually I thought, well, that is actually, you know, that's somebody whose ears are their primary sense. And I think maybe we've hit on it. That's it. You know, I think it's finding somebody where their hearing is the primary sense that they you know, rely on beyond their other ones. Oh, cool.
Well, Richard, it's been really nice to chat to you today.
Fantastic.
Thank you for showing us around and for teaching us about what it is to run a hire facility and supervise some really complicated jobs. Hope the rest of 2023 goes well, and maybe we can catch up at some point in the future.
I'm thrilled that you could come by.
Thank you. And we'll be doing a workshop at the audio department, so we've got some videos of that coming soon. And thank you for sticking to the end of the video, and hopefully we can do more like this soon.